Welcome everybody to today's coffee break. Today we're delighted to have Brian Doran, who's going to talk to us about the SkyPanel X. But first, let me just thank our sponsors. These are the companies that make all these events possible for PERG, Anton-Bauer, ARRI, Astera, Camera One, Too Close Lenses, Dynamic Light Gear, Panavision, Taylor & Taylor, the Camera Division, and Zeiss. And don't forget to follow us on all our social media. So without further ado, let me hand it off to Brian. He's going to tell us about their new fantastic product.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. So here I'll now share my screen. Yeah, so thanks for having me. It's maybe some of us have already seen the launch video or read up on the SkyPanel X a little bit, but this will be a nice chance to go over some of the details and have a good Q&A at the end. So thanks for having me. The first thing first, we have here the SkyPanel X. If everyone hasn't seen it, our new LED 2x1 panel. And first things first, we're going to continue to offer the classic SkyPanel S60C that we've had, and that will be in addition to the new SkyPanel X. So these are both going to remain in our portfolio. And we'll get a bit into the concept of the SkyPanel X. So the first thing maybe to talk about would be the name. The X for us is solving these real user problems and excelling in multiple applications. And so we're able to multiply the value and the potential of this light. But really what's important is that it's this tool that was kind of came about from conversations we've been having with the rental owners like yourselves, with gaffers and DPs, console operators and lighting crew to try and really, solve real problems. And this has been our real path the whole way through this product, starting maybe around 18 months ago with these just blue sky conversations with customers, with rentals, and then starting to put together a product concept, testing these different DMX specifications with programmers. Eventually we can start putting together some software prototypes, get feedback on that. And we're even able to do a proper sort of beta test, really more like an alpha test all over the world, to get feedback on the product early enough in its life cycle that we could still make hardware changes, not just a roadshow, but like truly showing an unfinished product and getting real customer feedback. And that's brought us to today, where we have the SkyPanel X. So this is a weatherproof next generation LED panel, and it's a native soft light, a native hard light, and works as an open face, for a bounce, as well as being a scalable, this modular system. So we'll get into all of that. As far as use cases, when we've been talking to our customers, some of the things they're telling us, where they could see using the new SkyPanel X is, of course, like in the cinema style, keying directly with the soft adapters or with the hyper optic through diffusion, using that as an overhead, as a backlight, or even for these sort of beam effects in outdoor or indoor sets. Then we've talked to some people who are more in like the live television or broadcast world about how they might be able to use this for like wash light for broadcast sort of setups, and what about the product needed to, I guess, be adjusted to really meet their needs in that world. And then there's also the live event stuff, people telling us how they might be able to use SkyPanel X for that could be virtual production, or it could be real stage lighting applications with a lot of flash and eye candy. So going into the actual fixture, we have first this soft panel application. So of course, when we're making this new sky panel, it has to be an excellent soft light. And so we have this, right here we see the dome diffusion on the SkyPanel X. One of these will come with every fixture that we ship. Just a really nice, really simple diffusion option. Then there's the punchy hard light way to use the SkyPanel X. So this is with the hyper adapter, or sorry, the hyper optic. And we'll get into that a bit more later, but a really punchy, powerful beam from this panel light. And you can also use it as a bouncing fixture. When I have a unit in front of me, I'm able to show, when we say like a native hard and a native soft light, this bouncing picture photo kind of shows what I'm talking about, where you can remove any diffusion or optic from the front of the fixture and just have those bare LEDs, but they're actually protected by a hardened glass with gaskets around it. So you can, sort of like knock right on the front of the fixture. And I know, especially for everyone here, in that the rental house world, I'm sure we've all repaired a few S60s or had a few S60s with light engine damage. So on the SkyPanel X, those light engines or those diodes are behind this protective glass. And we've done this, I mean, on one hand, of course, you want to protect the LEDs, but the reason that we have still these swappable optics is so that we can have this native soft and native hard, where we have a really efficient soft light because we can just go straight with the diffusion over the light engine, or we have a really efficient, really focused hard light because we're not taking a soft light and trying to focus it. We're going straight off of those LEDs. Like you could see on a real fixture, especially, there's these little clusters of LEDs. And for the hyper optic, we have an optical element over each cluster, really getting the most out of those LEDs. So we're not trying to harden a soft light. And then when you do want to do a wash, we're not putting a diffusion in front of that focused hyper optic. We're just giving you, the best performance out of the LEDs in either scenario. Then, of course, we have this modular system that's been getting a lot of attention. So on the bottom left there, you'd see the X23, we're calling it, with the hyper optics, with the hard optic. And on the bottom right, we have an X23 with the dome on it for that big, powerful soft light. So kind of what I was talking about before, that native hard and native soft light is really one of the key identities of this fixture to really excel in both ways. And what's really cool, by being this native hard light, it let us do something really interesting, which is to get a round beam out of this square panel. And you could even see when you look at one of these up close that the diodes are rotated, and just really precise optics in the hyper optic give you that round beam out of the rectangular fixture, which is really interesting. And what this level of precision also lets us do is have multiple fixtures working like one light. So that X23, here we can see it up in a condor with hyper optics. It's going to be creating one singular round beam with one solid shadow. So you don't need to drop a diffusion in front of it. It is going to act like one fixture, these three stacked together in the modular setup. And then, of course, we also have here an IP66 2x1 panel. So that's, your dust and your water or liquid protection. So just to get a little bit more into the whole IP66 thing, some people maybe already know this, but the first number in the IP rating is your solid particles. That's, like dust, dirt, that sort of thing. The second number is liquid, fluid, usually water for us. So the IP66 rating for the SkyPanel X means that this fixture is totally dust tight. So it's not going to, have any sort of dust or debris getting into the electronics and damaging them. I mean, you'd still, want to blow the fan out once in a while, but it won't be causing damage to the fixture. And the second 6 in the sort of moisture column means that the SkyPanel X is protected against powerful jets of water from any angle. This isn't really a power washer, but it's totally safe to use in the rain. And you could even say if this fixture goes onto a location job, comes back covered in, dirt and mud, you could hose this off, with your normal residential hose, and then just dry it with a soft cloth. So we're expecting, a really long life cycle with this product, a lot easier external cleaning, easier prep and easier QCing when it gets back from these location jobs. And something notable about the way that ARRI is doing our IP certification is maybe not so well known that with IP rating, there's not, it's something that's referred to as like a self-certification, where a company can just do the test themselves, this IP test, and say, yes, we passed, which is strange. So instead of doing that, we are using TUV SUD. They're an independent testing laboratory. They also do ETL tests and those sort of things. So they're running the test for us as an independent voice. So when we've been talking to all of our customers about what does it mean for this to be a sky panel, like what are the points it has to hit, and what are the improvements we have to make, we've kind of gotten a lot of feedback that it kept coming around to these 8 points of what really defines the SkyPanel X as this next high-end LED panel. It's 20 times more output than your normal soft light, thanks to that hyper optic, for a really long throw, really hard punch. People were telling us it was super essential that we have this weatherproofing for a longer life cycle, for less damage with that IP66 rating. It was really important to customers. They were telling us to have, better color, this full spectrum color science, and an extended CCT range. So the SkyPanel X has a CCT range from 1500 to 20,000 degrees Kelvin. And that's with really good color throughout the whole range. Even when you're down at 1500, having, CRI scores into the 90s, not just like an amber LED that's maybe nice on a background, but not usable to light costume or talent. It's having that good color through the whole extended range. People were telling us, of course, that the low end dimming is really important, especially for a panel where it might be close to the talent's face. So for the SkyPanel X, we have optimized low end dimming by default. There's no special setting to turn on, to forget to turn on. So really solid dim to zero all the time with the SkyPanel X. And then for people that are, maybe in virtual production or maybe just on a normal show with a console, there's 8 pixels to play with on the SkyPanel X for, pixel mapping control, for effects, that sort of thing. And this is maybe the biggest piece of feedback we got about what should the next SkyPanel be is it has to have an internal power supply and built-in wireless. So we hear you. It's a built-in power supply here, so it's quicker to set up, especially when you're setting up a big rig of these, less bits and pieces to keep track of. And the built-in CRMX from Lumen Radio, especially useful for your location jobs. Then sort of talking about that communication, we have these 2 power and 2 data ports. So of course, you have like your AC in and out, your daisy chain for AC power. Then we also have a daisy chainable Ethernet port, or 2 Ethernet ports. And this is, of course, it's useful for your normal single fixture rigs like your overheads, but this is also really applicable for that X22 and X23 modular system, and I'll get into that a bit later. And then, of course, it's that quick release yoke, and having that bent yoke as well, like, for their soft boxes, having the bent yoke to let you tilt the fixture further downward without banging into the yoke. The quick release on the yoke is also really useful for the modular setup or for your big rigs. And maybe you guys have seen this, but we also have, of course, an S60 adapter. So this is something that we heard a lot from the rental owners we would talk to, that, yeah, we want the next thing, but we also have this huge inventory of S60 accessories, and, we don't want to go rebuying all of the accessories that we're sitting on. So the SkyPanel X is fully compatible with all of your S60 front-based accessories when you use this S60 adapter. You can kind of see in this picture, it quite literally is like the front of an S60 that you snap into the SkyPanel X. And so it recreates that same distance between the LEDs and the diffusion panel. So you'll have the same optical performance with the SkyPanel X. So you could use all of your standard diffusion options. You could use all of your beam modifiers, like your honeycombs, your barn doors, the sky benders for cycle lighting, all of those existing accessories, your chimeras, your soft boxes will work with the SkyPanel X thanks to the S60 adapter. So getting more into this modular setup, the naming scheme we've sort of been using is SkyPanel X. We're calling it an X21, just one fixture. It's that 2x1 format. And so we're getting about 5,000 lux at 10 meters, almost 500 or 450 foot candles at, around 10 yards. And we have those 8 pixels of control we talked about, and the whole fixture consumes 800 watts. And now what we can do is have a 2x2 format, this square X22 modular format, where we've doubled the output, almost 900 foot candles, we now have these 16 pixels to play with, and it's consuming 1600 watts, still behaving like one fixture with one solid beam. And then we have the X23, the biggest of these modular setups. So now we're up to 1300, a little over 1300 foot candles, 24 pixels to play with for your pixel mapping, and the whole system consumes 2400 watts at 120 volts, puts us right at the 20 amp limit. In real world, the wattage is probably a little less than 2400. That's kind of the fans overridden to run at their maximum RPM, every connector in use, like a technical power consumption. But yeah, this modular X23 setup will fit on a single 20 amp circuit at 120 volts. And we're getting now an output that's really competing with like your 9 watt maxi brute with 500 watt lamps, or like beating a 2.5K HMI, starting to get really into like the big gun territory. And you can see what that gets you, that photo from earlier, just a little larger, that you get this really nice hard beam of light looking like one fixture when it hits the talent there out of the X23. This was actually shot during one of our field tests, one of our beta testers, Uwe Greiner, and we'll go into some of our other beta testers' feedback a bit later. So when we're talking about these modular systems, I guess some of the feedback we got a lot was like, you know, it has to be fast, and it has to be simple, and it has to be a real benefit to set up, you know, not just like a sort of game. So with the X23, you can control this whole system, this now large fixture, with just the one stirrup. And this is kind of a nicer detail showing why it's important that we have that daisy chaining. This photo shows the AC jumpers and the Ethernet jumpers that are built into the frame, the X23 frame. It's not like permanently embedded. It sort of is just into these guides. So if one of these cables breaks or is lost, it can be replaced. But you can see here we have on the right side our AC cable daisy chains, so that when you set up an X23, you just have one stinger going to the lunchbox, you know, doing your home run. And then on the left, we have our Ethernet daisy chains that allow data to go from fixture to fixture and let you control it like one. And what's really nice is this modular system, you can just pop out that X23 frame and install the X22 frames to turn it into that, you know, that 2x2 square format. The yoke, the top part, stays. You would just change the frames on the sides, we're calling them. And what's really interesting about that is, you know, of course, you could use it like a traditional fixture with the, you know, the traditional yoke, but you could also mount directly from those frames. You could put a junior pin or, you know, a pipe clamp right into that X22 or X23 frame and hang it from the truss directly. So you could see it's a bit of a lower profile, you know, like not as, it's not going to hang as low from your truss when you're mounting directly from the frames, as opposed to having that big yoke hanging down. So going back to the control, that X22 or X23 fixture, it can be controlled with just one control panel. And then since we're daisy chaining data, or it can be controlled via Bluetooth. We're going to have a free Bluetooth app called Lico, L-I-C-O. And this is going to use the built-in Bluetooth 5.0 of the SkyPanel X. And I don't know if anyone here is like really into the programming side, but the Lumen Radio CRMX chip that we use, that everyone uses, it also has Bluetooth. It uses Bluetooth BLE, the low energy. And because we have a dedicated Bluetooth 5.0 adapter as well, you could use the ARRI Lico app and you know, another Bluetooth app like Blackout or Luminaire on a tablet, and you could have them both paired instead of having to trade off control. And then the SkyPanel X, like an X23 array, can be controlled with just one DMX profile, you know, wirelessly with CRMX or hardwired. And we're really trying to talk to more programmers and get a sense of how they would want to work, and letting you control this really like one fixture on your console, where, you know, you don't need to waste all your channels with 3 different fan parameters. They're all going to run the same way. So just treating this like one big fixture with 24 pixels to play with. And there's actually some really interesting things you can do with the different pixels on the SkyPanel X. So on the left, we have the, these 8 pixels playing around with the X21 dome, that soft light adapter that comes with, or that soft light optic that comes with every fixture. And for this, you get that sort of soft gradient between them, a bit of this like natural kind of blending look. Maybe that'll be more useful for your pixel mapping or for like a car process gag. But on the right with the hyper optic, we have a much different look out of these different pixels, out of these 8 pixels. And it's because each of these sort of zones in the hyper optic is individually separated from its neighbor. So you can get really contrasting colors between the neighboring pixels without having a bleed between them, and get this kind of interesting eye candy effect out of the hyper optic. And then of course you could put further diffusion in front of this if you want to play around and get creative. Like with the hyper optic, you could put S60 diffusers right in the front of it, or you could use this beam enhancer filter that we're coming out with. So there's always this degree of customization if the talent wants to do that, if the gaffer wants to do that. And there's some other modularity features as well. We have here this twin quick lock bracket where if you wanted to make your own sort of array out of truss really quickly, you would just snap one of these quick lock brackets into the side of your SkyPanel X, and you put its neighbor right next to it into the same bracket, and it lets you do this long linear kind of array for building out on the truss. And the spacing between fixtures is still tight, that you're going to get that sort of homogenized beam out of multiple lights. And so this twin quick lock bracket will come just like the quick lock and the U shape. The pin or pipe clamp would be put on by production depending on how they want to do their rigging. So it would just come without that sort of last piece of mounting hardware. And just going into the sort of conversations we've been having throughout the development process with this light, it's really been trying to solve these real problems instead of like playing in the sandbox. And so when we've been talking to rental owners like yourselves, some of the really important things for them have been, getting this long lifetime out of the product, a better ROI. And that's kind of like the ARRI brand of tank-like products that are going to last a long time and stand up to, getting beat on set. And that also plays into the IP66 rating, easier maintenance, fewer repairs. Oh, I see some stuff in the chat. I'll take a second just to answer this. Lyco is separate from the ARRI Stellar app from Dash. Yeah, so taking a step back, Lyco will be a new app separate from Stellar. It's more just like a real-time controller on your tablet sort of thing. It will work with the SkyPanel X, and if you get a Bluetooth 5.0 dongle, like a consumer dongle for the Orbiter, you could also use Lyco. But yeah, it will not, it's a separate thing from Stellar. Sorry. Other things that the rental owners were telling us were kind of interesting or important, like I said, was that S60 compatibility for reusing your existing inventory. And then just in general, having a sort of focused range of accessories. We really have a pretty limited number of accessories with the SkyPanel X. So it should be a little bit easier to determine, like, all right, where should you be investing? A bit easier. I guess not so much of a guessing game, like what are the customers going to ask for? We're trying to streamline what this fixture is. And then in talking to, the gaffers and the DPs, the big thing they ask for is, of course, make it brighter. They want to be able to do these long throws and use LEDs like they've been using HMIs, giving them that creative freedom that the LEDs bring in terms of, color tunability, wireless control, everything like that. The gaffers and the DPs, of course, they're also still interested in the weatherproofing and the built-in wireless. Like, I don't know, we're always hearing how they're fewer and fewer shooting days on every feature, on every show, so they need to have working as fast as possible, and that plays into the modularity as well, to have this scalable rigging, like with the twin quick lock bracket to do the big rigs, or the X22 and X23 modularity. It has to work really quickly and really smoothly in order to be worth it, because there's always that time crunch on set. And then of course the great color, the dimming, the shadow, and that goes without saying that the DPs want the best skin tone possible, and the light has to deliver. And we've been really making an effort, like I said, to talk to programmers more. Sometimes they can be the most technical person on set, and when there's dozens of fixtures up in the air, the programmer is really the person that's going to get the most out of them. That's the fixture is going to look good or look bad based on how well it plays with that console oftentimes. And so we've tried to simplify our DMX chart and really speak the language of the consoles a bit more, give them these pixels to play with for better pixel mapping. And then when they are using these modular setups like the X22 or X23, treating it like one fixture so that you don't need to waste all of these channels on redundant settings that you're rarely going to change. And then of course there's the lighting crew. This is like your independent filmmaker now. It's maybe your gaffer in a few years. So for them, it's important that that built-in power supply, so that it's a faster setup, having the same sort of size and weight as the S60, that it's not like a whole new way to work. It's sort of keeping with the workflows that people are used to. And we even have this legacy DMX mode, where modes 1 and 6 from the SkyPanel S60 are brought onto the SkyPanel X. Those are the two most popular DMX modes we hear, and we've implemented them on this new fixture. We've even limited the CCT range of the SkyPanel X to match the S60 when you're using these legacy DMX modes, trying to make that transition as comfortable as possible, since the S60 is this big ubiquitous thing on set. And there's been a lot of cool other things we're able to do, since we are this camera and lighting company. It's been the SkyPanel X has given us this opportunity to really work together with our camera colleagues in a way that we haven't been able to up until now. And what's come out of that is this ARRI Alexa mode for the SkyPanel X. This is a setting where you can sort of change the color imagery or the color science of the SkyPanel X to better match the Alexa camera sensor. I mean, of course, the SkyPanel X has great color for any camera, but we sort of know the secret sauce for the Alexa sensor. And so our two R&D teams got together to really push that as far as it could and just get a great image when you're using an Alexa camera. And on our solution side, that's our colleagues who are working in virtual production, mixed reality. They've made a digital twin in the Unreal Engine for the SkyPanel X. So what that is if you're working in that virtual production space, you have a SkyPanel X here on the floor in the real set, and then in the virtual environment, by default in Unreal, you just have these sort of like vague, generic light sources like omnidirectional spotlight. What the digital twin is it lets you actually say, okay, in that volume, in that virtual space, give me a SkyPanel X21 with the SkyPanel adapter or with the S60 adapter and set it to 5600. It lets the sort of crew in the real world communicate in the way that they're used to, in the way that they're comfortable in that virtual space. And like I mentioned before, we were lucky enough to get to do these beta tests for, I think we must have spent about 3 months touring a few early prototypes around the world and got some really nice feedback about it, some really interesting feedback. So Josh Hensley was at our LA beta test. He was the gaffer on Winning Time and worked on The Mandalorian. And so for him, it was really interesting to see that round beam coming out of the fixture with the hyper optic, and especially when you're using like the X22 or X23 array, to still see one solid beam. Just in general, seeing that modularity could work efficiently and not have to slow him down. David Ungaro was at our Paris beta test, and he actually gave us the idea to let you mount the X22 or X23 directly from the frames. That picture we saw earlier about not using the round part of the yoke, but just sticking the frame straight onto your truss for a more compact rig. Just a great piece of feedback that, you know, you hear the best ideas from the people who are really using the gear every day. And Uwe Greiner was in our Berlin beta test, and we also got to do a field test with him. That was really interesting about getting his feedback on how we could use it, not just as a soft light, but as a hard light. Like you saw those photos of him using the X23 off a Condor, and Uwe is thinking that he could see this, replacing his 4K HMIs in the future. And it was just really good to get his feedback about how this fixture might actually be used on a real set. Rich Barbadillo was in our New York beta test, and we had quite a bit of conversation about motorization of the SkyPanel X. Maybe you've seen at IBC there was a bit of social media buzz over this motorized yoke that Clay Packy made with us for the SkyPanel X, and Rich was also really good to talk to in terms of like the business perspective. He has a rental operation here in New York, and so it was great to get his feedback about the business side of this fixture. So I have a question in the chat. With the hyper optic, what does the beam look like when lighting each cell as a different hue? Does the beam resolve as one blended source, or can you see the different cells on the subject? It kind of depends on your distance. If you have radically different hues, it'll resolve after, a relatively short distance. But if you're like 3 feet away, you could see the different colors on that hyper optic. And that's even more prevalent if you use this sort of egg crate that DOP Choice is making that I can show later on. But yeah, like if you wanted multiple color shadows out of the hyper optic, you could get that really close up. But once you're like a few feet away, it begins to color blend. I mean, I guess it will blend into some weird ugly color if you have like a lot of different saturated colors, as opposed to blending to, like a white color if you're doing something more typical. But it's something worth playing around with. Ultimately, the color mixing will occur after like 3 feet or so. But I suppose it'll depend on how deep the colors are that you're pushing out of those pixels. And so the last one here was James Friend. He was at our London beta test. James was the DP on All Quiet on the Western Front that got the Oscar for Best Cinematography. And so he actually was really instrumental in seeing this fixture as like an open face, as a bouncing light, and was really involved in making these different DOP Choice like snoots and snap grids that I'm going to show later. But really useful feedback about how we could use this thing with no optic at all as a bounce and get a really nice sort of light out of it. There's a few accessories that I think I touched on, but I didn't show as in depth. We have this beam enhancer for the hyper optic. This is kind of like what Dash was alluding to about color mixing. If you are maybe just wanting to like soften the edges of the hyper optics beam, you could drop this beam enhancer in front of it. It's kind of like a Hampshire frost, and it really is like designed to meet that spec. Yeah, so it'll help with like cleaning up the edges a little bit. And you could also use like an S60 diffusion of any strength in front of that hyper optic. And we have, of course, all your different DOP Choice optics here, or modifiers here, like the snoot that you could just use directly in front of the fixture as an open face. You could put it over the dome. You could put it in front of the hyper. And what's interesting is you could also put the snap grid in front of it. And that would just go right in front of the fixture, or it could go on top of the hyper optic or on top of the snoot, kind of like locks into it. And what's really interesting, I don't think I have a photo of it right now, but DOP Choice actually changed the spacing of their grid to match that of the hyper optic. So each grid on the DOP Choice will line up with one of the pixels on the hyper optic. And then of course, you know, you have your traditional snap bags, the soft boxes by DOP Choice, and Chimera as well. Chimera's working on right now a huge softbox for the X23 for that big modular setup. And I mean, from here we just have, you know, your quick look data, but this is all on the website at this point in more depth anyway. We have the data sheet online now and preliminary versions of like the user manual, and all of that deep tech stuff is available now on the website. So I don't want to spend too much time going through the nuts and bolts. We could always also, of course, email about that if there's any info that can't be found. And I'm going to stop sharing. One thing I know people will ask for in terms of deep info is photometrics. Right now, we have just sort of these preliminaries from the presentation, but R&D is currently, I guess, preparing to do the final photometric tests on the SkyPanel X. Like, I just submitted a list of sort of scenarios for them, like, okay, please make a check of the SkyPanel X with this optic, that optic, this optic at these different settings. So we should have final photometrics. I'm thinking sometime later this month, and then those will become published, and we'll update the ARRI Photometrics app, you know, where we store all of that stuff as well. So I'd love to chat a little bit though. Does anyone have any questions? Any suggestions, anything like that from the rental perspective or in general? I'm happy to chat. So release date is a question in the chat. Well, right now we're doing pre-orders. We should be live to do like proper quoting and confirmations. If not at the end of this week, then we should be able to start doing that next week. And then we should start to see units arriving sometime in November, you know, shipping, everything like that. But I see that Caroline, my colleague in sales, is in the chat. So hit up Caroline for any sort of pre-order and things like that. List price. Okay, so this one I've got. Let me just, well, you know what, actually, I guess the list price thing should go to Caroline too. We have list pricing out. I would encourage you to reach out to Caroline or reach out to whatever, you know, dealer you would normally go through. I know some people maybe buy direct, in which case, you know, reach out to the ARRI salesperson that you would normally communicate with. But yeah, pricing is available at this point. Dash asks, is there going to be a test pattern in Stellar or Lyco for rental houses to use to QC their SkyPanel X inventory? No, this is a cool question. Not an uninformed question at all. That is an interesting thing. I've heard of some rental houses who kind of like used a Raspberry Pi to make their own S60 QC kind of like pattern. Like it would use RDM to automatically go to like RGBW, run through each channel, that sort of thing. It's definitely a reasonable kind of request. I'm gonna write that down. I don't know that there'll be a way to do it in Stellar, but I wonder if we might be able to figure something out with the Lyco app. Yeah, I'm gonna make myself a little note about that. So I'll just say rental house QC button or something like that. Would it be okay if it was one fixture at a time? Or because that's sort of how Lyco works. It's just like connecting to one fixture, one fixture, one fixture. Would that still speed things up, Dash, if you connected to one fixture with the Bluetooth app, hit the test button? Does that work for you? We talked last week. Oh yeah, we talked last week about the specs. Okay. All right. Yeah, I see Dash's response. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's sort of this topic we've talked about a lot over the years of like how to build that in, and maybe Lyco would be a good way to finally implement something like that. Sample lights to make a case. So right now we have just a handful of units that are going to be arriving for like our sort of demo roadshow. it's a it's a pretty small amount at the very beginning, so I don't think we'll be able to support much outside of like our core activities at first. Like we have one set of units coming to New York, and then we're going to ship them to LA, and then they'll do LDI. So it's going to be pretty tough in the early days to get sample units around, but I'll try and figure something out, Larry. I'll make myself a note, but yeah, it's not going to be super easy, I think, to get some sample units. I'm definitely bugging people in Germany for them though, and I will continue to harangue my German colleagues. What else? Where on the fixture is the proper location to secure a safety cable when rigging it overhead? Let's see. I think I've got an okay picture of that in the presentation. I'm just gonna go back to share real quick then. All right. So, oh, you know what? Oh, my sharing has stopped. At any rate, the top handle of the SkyPanel X is actually the rigging point. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking through my presentation to see if I have a decent picture. I guess the best bet would be, you know, like the first picture I showed here. This one. This top handle, it kind of is collapsible because when you have an X22 or an X23, we need them as close as possible so it can collapse down. But that handle is built right into the heat sink of the SkyPanel X, and that's really like the structural core of the product. So that top handle is the safety cable rigging point. Oh, you know what? Actually, there was something I remember I was talking with Harry about that's maybe interesting for this group. Well, we'll go over the connectors first, but on the left you have these two. Do people see my mouse? I always forget what these are.
Yeah,
Cool.
we do. Yeah.
So we have our two Ethernet ports here. They're EtherCon, you know, it's like the proper locking Ethernet RJ45 connector. So we could daisy chain ArtNet or SACN, or we would use this for that modularity setup. Then we have our traditional 5-pin DMX in and out. Up here we have a USB-C. That's the only USB-C connector or the only USB connector on the fixture, you know, for your firmware updates, that sort of thing. And over here is our DC input for battery power. It's 48 volts like the Orbiter was, or like a full, you know, power S60. And then we have this right here, that sort of well, it is that LEMO connector that you would use for the control panel if you wanted to use that with a hard wire instead of in the back of the fixture. On the right here, of course, is our AC daisy chain. And this little guy right here is interesting. This is a Gore-Tex valve. So because the SkyPanel is an IP66 product, it's like sealed, like it's pressurized in there. And so that Gore-Tex valve exists to hold that pressure. And what I have a meeting tomorrow. We're having like the sort of service kickoff meeting on the SkyPanel X about like how repairing these should work. So this whole like the electronics area will be sealed with gaskets, and there's always that fear of like, oh, you know, once you open up this fixture, when you put it back together again, is it still IP66, or you know, what happens? And I think there's a process that the Germany service team has devised using this valve to test the pressure of the inside of the SkyPanel X to see that it's still making a good seal. So there ought to be a way to service this and then check that you're still IP66 afterward, instead of just crossing your fingers and seeing what happens the next time it rains. Again, I see some stuff in the chat. Are there cases in the works? Yeah, I mean, I know Larry was talking about playing around with one. ARRI's exploring a few options as well for what a case should look like for the SkyPanel X. Probably it would just be a single fixture case, because you know, anything bigger than that and it gets a little bit crazy. But we're exploring options right now, and then you know, I'm sure that independent case companies will be putting out some nice solutions too. Dash asks about the ports. Any courtesy USB-C ports in the fixture, will that valve be labeled as do not unscrew? I don't think the valve will have a label on it. Not that I am aware of, but I don't know that it's easy to unscrew either. I haven't tried to remove it myself. We'll have to check on that. Uh, and the USB, it's just the one USB-C port. So one USB-C port for your firmware updates. I guess, is a courtesy port implying a second one? I'm not sure, but it'll just be the one USB-C. Oh, and maybe worth mentioning also on the back here, we see this little handle on the bottom left. So this is not a rigging point. This is just like a handle to give someone a grip for when they're tilting the fixture up and down. Power give out of, oh yeah, the USB-C port's powered. You could like, charge your phone or whatever off of it, like how people maybe do with an S60. Yeah, the USB-C port on the SkyPanel X is powered, and I think it's like a 15-watt port. And then what else? Of course, there's the little status light here, and you can see the whole open fan section in the middle. The fans are IP68, I want to say, so they can be hit directly with water, and we don't have to seal them or anything like that. Let's see. Anything else? Anyone else? Guess I'll go back to the gallery here. So Dash asks about the Ethernet cable, the daisy chaining for the X22 and 23. So it won't automatically like detect and make well, I guess it depends how you think of detect. So there's actually like a little YouTube tech tip that we put out. I'll try and find that. But how that X22 or X23 works is you would set it up as an array. And this is like a manual process where once you have them all wired up, you just go into the SkyPanel X's menu, click into this array setup thing. It's like a 2-minute process, just like 1, 2, 3, who's the top, bottom, middle. You can name them if you want to, and then they'll begin to act like one fixture. So it will automatically see that there are SkyPanel X's that are connected to one another. And let's see. I don't think we have the array tech tip out yet, but that's upcoming. So it'll automatically populate this list of any SkyPanel X it sees, and then you just assign them to an array. So I guess it auto detects in terms that it creates a list, but actually assigning the position of the fixtures or renaming them if you want, that'll be up to you. And you would do that from the control panel or through the Lyco Bluetooth app. So then if there's nothing else, I guess I'll throw it back to Harry to close us out. But thanks for having me. Thank you very much. And it's always good to hear from you all, and looking forward to getting some emails in the future. And I'm also looking forward to the first rental house that has a customer really destroy one of these. That's always an interesting one. So whoever gets the first truly insane customer damage SkyPanel X, I can't wait. Well, I don't know if I can't wait to see it because it's kind of bad news, but there's some interesting ones. You know how it is. The first one dropped off like a highway overpass. Don't jinx it. You can't jinx it because it's for sure going to happen, right?
All right. Awesome. Well, Brian, that was awesome. It was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for your questions. And, we'll follow up as time goes on and find those fixtures that have been thrown off overpasses. And
yeah, let me add them.
All right. Well, thanks again, Brian. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
All right.